When I was in undergrad, I there was a sociology class that gave me a run for my money. And during those times, I'm sure a lot of people that have gone to college are aware of what they called Turnitin. And the challenge was a lot of us would just copy and paste information from the internet and put it in our papers, and with Turnitin it would find out the percentage of plagiarization that would have happened. And I wasn't too sure and very confident about sociology. I think it was sociology methodology or something like that. So one of my friends suggested that instead of me submitting the whole assignment on the Turnitin website, I should just submit the first page. Well, they forgot to also add on that what I could have done was I could have also attached partial of my other paper on the sociology exam, on the sociology paper, so that when the Turnitin was identifying like keywords or plagiarized words, he wouldn't be able to get a high percentage because it wouldn't be the right subject anyways. But instead, what does Lena do? I submitted only one page. And of course, that didn't go very well, so I got a 0 on that paper. And from that point on, I was anxious about failing sociology because it was the only class. I was on my last semester of my third year, and graduating was the most important. I remember the morning, like I studied a lot, and I used to consult with the professors as well to make sure I was writing the other assignments well. I was going for my tutorials, and I qualified for the exam, even though one of the papers that I wrote, I got a 0. But then, as soon as I got to the venue, I cried. I remember just going into this state of, I was just so anxious, and I cried because I was like, what if I fail, and if I don't write this, and I don't graduate? So many things came over me. What am I going to tell my mom? So what I've just told you right now is what anxiety looks like. Anxiety is just like an emotional response that your body tells you and says, hey, something is not right. Anxiety is that feeling you have when you're about to go on a date with somebody and you think, blue tie, red tie. Oh, blue tie would be ideal for this situation. Anxiety is the feeling you have before a big interview that tells you, you need to read more on the job description so that you're ready for the interview. That's the good type of anxiety. So anxiety is crippling for some people, especially when it's just, this imminent threat. It's an anticipation of a future threat, real or perceived. Because perception is reality, right? And when you're walking along in your life, you're not just an individual on your own. You also have your value system. You also have your parental voice that tells you, hey, if you fail that exam, I'm going to kill you. And sometimes it gets so overwhelming to a point where studying is hard for you to do because of all these things racing in your mind. So today I want to talk about anxiety, anxiety disorders in particular, because there's so many anxiety disorders. And I thought maybe giving you a little bit of an overview of what anxiety disorders are would be helpful. And maybe towards the end, we can talk about some of the interventions or ways that you can cope with anxiety. So there's generalized anxiety disorder, and I feel like that's the most popular of them. And the timeline is that you've been experiencing that worry I was talking about different things, irritability, fatigue, you can't concentrate, you're restless for 6 months and above. The worrying is not specific to an event, it's just generally worrying. You worry about worrying. So if I don't read, and then if I go into the exam and I fail, and then when I fail, it means I will not graduate. And if I graduate, I'm going to be homeless. And if I'm homeless, I'm going to be poor. And if I'm poor, I'm going to be on drugs. Did you see that spiraling of thoughts? Yes, that's generalized anxiety disorder. And then in the anxiety disorder is another disorder that we call adjustment disorder. And this is usually in anxieties that happen because of a triggering event. And the triggering event could be you lose your job, right? Or you get expelled from school. And then there are mood symptoms. And some of the mood symptoms usually are a combination of, both anxiety and depression since the triggering event. And you've got worrying, you've got irritability, and this happens up to 6 months, right? Up to 6 months. So let's say, for example, you lose your job from 1 month to 5 months and 30 days, and the month ends on 31 days. That's still adjustment disorder. If it exceeds the 6 months after the event, it becomes generalized anxiety disorder. So the difference between generalized anxiety disorder and adjustment disorder are: generalized anxiety disorder is 6 months plus of the symptoms. Adjustment disorder is 0 to 5 months following a specific event. And then we move to panic disorders. And the timeline for that is a month and above. If the symptoms that I'm going to describe have lasted for a month and above, so which is panic attacks, palpitations, shortness of breath, just this impending fear. You're just scared, right? Fight or flight, right? And then that gets us to, specific phobias, because that's within the same family. Specific phobias is you're scared of crowds, you're scared of spiders, you're scared of heights. So what is particular about panic disorders is that they're ego dystonic, which means the person is aware and doesn't like it, which is why you struggle with it, because you're just like, oh my gosh, why am I just this scared? Every time I see a spider, I'm so scared. And in that, we have agoraphobia, and that is the fear of closed spaces, public transportation. Just in line, you just like panic, you sweat, and you're scared, right? So that's another one. And usually agoraphobia, social anxiety disorder, which are like social phobias and all that, those are usually, sometimes they go together. The comorbid of panic disorder, they usually go together. And then we move to another one that is very popular, which is PTSD. And PTSD is, it's like a potential life threat. That's a triggering event, a potential life threat. So it could be you got robbed, you were involved in an accident, even things like, your father used to abuse you, sexual abuse, domestic violence, right? Those are triggering events. And some of the trauma symptoms are hyperarousal. And what that means is that you easily startle when somebody tries to hug you, especially for people that have experienced domestic violence. What we've seen is, if a guy even tries to touch you, it just makes you feel uncomfortable. Avoidance. You just avoid situations that put you in that place, You avoid driving a car. You avoid traveling because you're just like, I might get into an accident again. You have intrusive thoughts, which could be, nightmares and things like that. Now, there's a difference again. Let's say there's been a triggering event less than a month ago, where you got into an accident. If these symptoms are presenting themselves a month into that accident or that triggering event, we call that acute stress disorder. But if those symptoms last from the month and above, that's what we call PTSD. So when we think of PTSD, let's not think about soldiers who've gone to war and experienced a lot of trauma in war, but it can be any triggering event, anything that has had such a profound impact, or you're experiencing hyperarousal, nightmares, flashbacks of that event. You're avoiding it, and you're just distressed. It's just making you not function the way that you normally do. In the anxiety disorders, we also have OCD, and I know this is like a popular one because people are like, she likes cleaning, then she has OCD. But let me just tell you that OCD is more than that. These are intrusive ideas, so obsessions. So, you just have these ideas racing in your mind, you hate dirty surfaces. But then you hating dirty surfaces causes you distress, like, oh my God, I will die if I don't wipe these dirty surfaces. So you start doing what we call repetitive rituals, which are those compulsions. So you wipe it the first time, it's not enough. You're like, germs. Second time, germs. Third time, germs, until you do it like 10, 15, 25 times, right? So it could be, your obsession is the door. You're sleeping in your bedroom and you realize, shoot, I could have left the door open. So it distresses you. You can't sleep. You can't focus if you don't feed into this compulsion. So what then this obsession. So what then happens is you go check on the door, not only once, 20 times, until the sun rises in the morning and you've been checking the door over and over and over again. Though you're partially relieved by, doing these compulsions, it's still not enough because you continue doing it over and over and over again. But then I guess the confusion always is between OCD and OCPD. And OCPD is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And OCD is actually what we call a ego dystonic disorder, which means the person is aware of these obsessions, they struggle with it and do not like it. Or which with OCPD, which is the personality disorder, it's ego systonic, which means the person is unaware and doesn't mind it. So they can literally live their life cleaning their house 15 times and not aware of it, that, you know, there's these people that if you enter the house and you don't take off your shoes, you'll die, because they are like very particular about their things. But they don't have that compulsion part where they do it over and over. They're just unaware of it because it's ingrained in their characteristic traits. Now, being a clinician, I have dealt with anxiety disorders for a very, very long time, and a lot of people that come in, it's just general anxiety disorder or panic disorders. Those are the most popular. And ways that you can go about it is, you know, what's popular is cognitive behavioral therapy, because those automatic thoughts that you have of fear, on, you know, being anxious, we call them cognitive distortions, right? And people have what we call thinking filters, and when information gets through your mind and you filter it, it comes out as a product of something. And it's just working on those cognitive distortions and changing to, you know, what is real and what isn't real, what is a fact and what isn't a fact. So for example, you want to go to a party and you're like, you know, I'm so scared that my friends, you know, are gonna laugh at me because of my dress. The fact is, you don't know whether they're going to laugh at you or not, right? Because you're not in their minds, you're not in their thoughts. But it's always making sure you take that step further of not allowing it to control you to a point where you cannot do the things that you want to do. So, I mean, we're definitely going to do a live on anxiety disorders, and people have specific questions. I can definitely engage in that and talk about it a little bit more. But thank you for watching.